Hey everybody, welcome to part 6 of my Beatles ranking videos. We're now into the last 3 quarters of my top 100. We're going to start at number 73 today, but before I do, a couple of viewers had commented that I apparently forgot number 153. It just got lost in the confusion. So to answer your questions, number 153 was Hold Me Tight off the With the Beatles album. Don't have a whole lot to say about it. I just happen to like the song. It's one of those very upbeat, up-tempo, classic early Beatles songs, and that's about all I have to say for it. It was on Meet the Beatles, but anyway, just wanted to throw that in there. So let's get started. Number 73 is going to be off Sergeant Pepper, Fixing a Hole. And I find this is one of the songs that really kind of gets overlooked on the first side, but I do like it a lot. You've got that little bit of a harpsichord opening and then straight into what I think is a very cool song. I don't know if it has anything to do with drugs or hallucinogens. I suspect that it does, but it's got a great guitar solo from George, and I love kind of that harpsichord that gives it a bit of, sort of gives me kind of like a fairground atmosphere to the song. So always love Fixing the Hole. Number 73. Number 72 is going to be Long, Long, Long. And it took me a long, long, long time to actually get into this song. I never used to actually play it. I would always end the record before it got there, right after Helter Skelter. So anyway, but I've come to appreciate it. It's a very quiet, meditative kind of a song. It's one of these early spiritual songs that George was writing. And it's only George, Paul, and Ringo, I believe, on this track. I don't think John is on it at all. But it's such a very cool, I love the organ on it. Ringo's drumming is so spectacular. Everything about it is very cool, even though it's very quiet. I think it's a perfect way to wind down the first side of the second record on the White Album. Number 71 is Yesterday, one of the most overplayed Beatles songs of all time, but there's no denying that it's a classic. It's been covered a million times at least. Seemingly every major artist back in the 60s and 70s at one time or another covered Yesterday. Elvis covered it. Bob Dylan even did a version of it. I don't know if it actually made it onto one of his albums, but I know he did record a version of it. But anyway, it's one of those timeless classics. And yeah, it's been overplayed, but still, it doesn't take away from the fact that it's such a great song. Number 70 to the Rubber Soul album for the opening track, Drive My Car. And yeah, I wish the opening track on Rubber Soul had been I've Just Seen a Face, but again, I'm not going to get into that discussion here, but Drive My Car, I was more familiar with it opening the Yesterday and Today album, but it's got a cool little R&B flavor to it, and it's kind of a silly lyric about somebody who is looking for a chauffeur and hits up somebody, and I don't know, it seems almost like there's some sort of undercurrent going on with the lyric here. It's a big come on or some kind of flirtatious scheme. Not sure exactly what it is, but at any rate, it's still a fun song. Number 69, Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. And the lyric to this song was taken from a poster, like a fairground poster that John found in an antique store. And I love the circus atmosphere to it. A lot of interesting effects, particularly in that middle section where it sounds like a calliope, some kind of organ, and apparently it's a bunch of tape splices that they use to create that, and it carries on until the end of the song. Again, some very cool studio trickery from George Martin. But yeah, it makes you feel like you're actually there at the circus, at this event that is going on. Number 68, the opening track to the Revolver album, one of George's greatest Beatles compositions, Taxman. And did you know it's Paul McCartney's actually playing the solo on this song, which I think is very cool. George commenting on the ridiculous tax rates in Britain at the time. He felt that all of their money was going to the tax man, and so he wanted to put in a lyric griping about it. But very cool for George to have the opening track on a Beatles album. And I love it. It's great guitar work and great background vocals from John and Paul. George nails his vocal. Great introduction to the Revolver album. Number 67, In My Life, going back to Rubber Soul. One of those standout John tracks, which took on more meaning after he passed away. But yeah, it's, for him to be writing in 1965 a song with this sentimentality to it, this kind of wistful nostalgia for, the fact that now he's a celebrity and kind of looking back on all his childhood friends and family and the people who I guess kind of supported him through it all. Is just very cool. And it actually started out very differently. The lyric was entirely almost like a Penny Lane type song where he started name checking different landmarks in and around Liverpool, and then decided to abandon that and make it more of a kind of a nostalgic look back at his childhood. Number 66, Magical Mystery Tour. I've always loved this song, and the great opening segment to the Magical Mystery Tour movie. But yeah, it's got all the fanfare that you would expect for what the Beatles were trying to get everybody excited about this Magical Mystery Tour, which in the movie ends up kind of falling flat. There's not much mystery. There's not much magic that actually happens in the movie, but the song itself more than makes up for it, and a great title track. Number 65, a slice of Beatles heavy metal, probably the heaviest song that they ever recorded next to Revolution, Helter Skelter. And this song was written about a playground slide, I presume back in Liverpool. But of course, it got co-opted by Charles Manson and the murders that happened in 1969, and the song took on an entirely different meaning. But nonetheless, it is a hard, blistering rocker, and Paul McCartney said he wrote it. He was reading an article where Pete Townsend was being interviewed, and he said, "The Who have just recorded the dirtiest, raunchiest, heaviest song ever." And I don't think anybody to this date knows what song Pete was talking about in that particular interview, but it stuck with Paul, and he kind of rose to the challenge. Like, yeah, we're going to record a song just as heavy as that one, and Helter Skelter certainly delivers. Number 64, Lady Madonna, great 1968 single. Paul McCartney trying to sing a little bit like Fats Domino. The piano is such a driving force to this song. It's got a great rhythm, great backing vocals by John and George. And it's sort of the sister song to Paul's solo track, Another Day. Both those songs kind of remind me. For some reason, Paul's always writing songs about lonely women. Not sure why. But for this song, it definitely works. And what a great single. The flip side, Inner Light, was great as well, but Lady Madonna is such a cool track. Number 63, Mother Nature's Son, one of the more quiet acoustic numbers from Paul on the White Album. I love the bit of brass band that they throw in near the end. But like Blackbird, it's Paul at his best, folky singer-songwriter style that would influence artists like James Taylor. But definitely, for me, one of the standout tracks on that first side of the second album of the White Album. Then we have number 62, Oh Darling, a great rocker from Paul on the first side of Abbey Road. He sings the hell out of it. He sings this as heavy as John sings Twist and Shout. But great, it just shows you what a great rock voice that Paul has. And he gets himself more worked up as the song goes on. I absolutely love it. Number 61, and many of you are probably going to be surprised that I have this song ranked so high, but it's Blue Jay Way off Magical Mystery Tour. And I think a lot of people kind of dismiss this song. You don't hear people talk about it a lot when they're talking about their favorite George Harrison compositions. But I love the psychedelic, trippy, ambient vibe to it. And it was written because George was waiting. He had a rented house in LA, and he was expecting Derek Taylor, their press officer, to show up. Derek Taylor got stuck in traffic, and so while George was waiting, he penned this composition. But it's very cool. I love the organ on it. Everything about this is so psychedelic, and I can't say that much more about it, but there's something about it that I really dig, and I think it also works well in the Magical Mystery Tour movie. Number 60, again, the excellent three-part harmonies of the Beatles on what was a B-side. Should have been on an album, I think, but some of the Beatles B-sides were as great as the A-sides. So I'm talking about Yes It Is, which was the B-side to Ticket to Ride. But gorgeous, gorgeous harmonies. John singing a great vocal. It's really a lot like This Boy, but I've always liked Yes It Is a lot more. And I love kind of that guitar effect that you get on there. You know what I'm talking about, kind of that whining little guitar sound that the Beatles were using in 1965. But Yes It Is a great song. Number 59, going back to Revolver or Yesterday and Today for Dr. Robert, which is a song about a drug dealer, basically, or somebody who was dosing people with LSD. I think it's probably a little more accurate. But yeah, a cool little rocker. I mean, not the heaviest thing the Beatles ever recorded, not the most clever John Lennon composition, but still, I love it. I think it is one of the tracks that made Yesterday and Today such a heavy, cool, mid-60s rock album. Number 58, Good Morning, off Sgt. Pepper, opens with that rooster crowing, and then the band breaks in, the brass band breaks in, which, is probably Sgt. Pepper's band that you see on the cover, right? But yeah, it's a cool John lyric. I know he dismissed it in the last years of his life, didn't think very highly of it, but I think it's a tremendous song, and I love the clever wordplay in it. I think the brass in it is very cool. Ringo's drumming is so heavy and so cool. And yeah, I love how it segues right into the Sgt. Pepper reprise. You got all those animal noises at the end. Just a very cool song. Number 57, going to the Help soundtrack for The Night Before. I first heard this on Rock and Roll Music Volume 2, and I've always loved it. That electric piano is very cool. Paul gives it a great vocal. Help was really Paul's album. I mean, Paul shines on there. Not that John's compositions are necessarily anything to sneeze at, but you got The Night Before, Another Girl, Yesterday is on there. I've Just Seen a Face is brilliant. And, John at the time talked about how he was jealous at how Paul could just so effortlessly come up with this ear candy like The Night Before. And definitely 65 was a great year for Paul. Number 56, going to the White Album for Happiness is a Warm Gun. The title was taken from a gun magazine that John saw. Obviously, the title to that gun magazine, I think, was also a play on the Charlie Brown Happiness is a Warm Puppy. But nonetheless, John was fascinated with that phrase and worked in some very weird, surrealistic imagery into the song. It's a song in 3 parts that he kind of tied all together, and it works brilliantly. It was a little difficult for the Beatles to nail down the arrangement of it, but I love it. It ends the first side of the White Album, and a very cool John track. Number 55, going to 1969, the Beatles, I believe it was their second single of 1969, The Ballad of John and Yoko. Got a very cool laid back rhythm to it. It's just John and Paul on this song. John playing the guitar, Paul playing the bass and the drums. You know, when John had an idea, when he had the inspiration for a song, he wanted to record it immediately, and George and Ringo were apparently not available, so he took Paul into the studio and they just knocked it out in one session. And it's a great, cool 1969 song from the Beatles. And the lyrics very much autobiographical. John telling the story of how challenging it was for he and Yoko to get married. So, like it or not, I think it's a very cool song. Number 54, Love You Too, going back to a George song on the Revolver album. I think my favorite of his Indian ragas that he would put on a Beatles album. And yeah, it's got a very cool, the Revolver Super Deluxe box set has the first take of it where it's just an acoustic rendition of it, acoustic demo. But I don't mind the Indian instrumentation. I think it's very cool. I think it's so exotic compared to what was coming out at the time. And yeah, I love the melody of it. Just a great song. Number 53, We Can Work It Out, the B-side to Day Tripper. John and Paul could do no wrong. They were just knocking out great single after great single, trying to keep pace with the Rolling Stones. We Can Work It Out, I think another song written about some relationship troubles that Paul and his girlfriend Jane Asher were having at the time. You got John, who wrote the middle eight about life is very short and there's no time for fussing and fighting, my friends. I love I think it's a harmonium or something in that song, but one of those songs, it takes me back to my childhood. The first time I heard that on one of my uncle's 45s, I'm sure, and thought it was just great. One of the songs that probably got me into the Beatles, actually. Number 52, I Want You, She's So Heavy, talking about heavy songs. I love this. The lyric is so minimalistic. It's such a primal lyric from John where he's just screaming his love and his passion for Yoko Ono. And it's a cool rock song in two parts, I guess you could say. You got the I Want You part and the She's So Heavy part. I like the fact that it just kind of cuts out immediately. So many songs in the 70s would use this template where you have the regular song, like Starship Trooper, for example, is one that immediately comes to mind, where it starts out as a regular song, and at the end, it just kind of builds and builds to this crescendo, this cacophony of noise, and this is the heaviest track on one of my favorite Beatles albums, Abbey Road. Number 51, Let It Be. Another song like Hey Jude, like Yesterday, that's played all the time, all over the radio. When the Get Back film came out, it felt like I was hearing this song all the time. They do like 20 versions of it, during the Get Back sessions or whatever. But it's still, Paul writing a bit about his mom, kind of a spiritual song for Paul, which is a bit unusual for him. But yeah, there's no denying it is just a great song. Paul was so excited to play it for the other Beatles. You got great, the guitar solo that I like the best is the version on the Let It Be album. Yeah, the guitar solo on the single is fine, but I really like kind of that blistering solo that you get on the album version. So that's my preference. Number 50, Penny Lane. I love Penny Lane so much. And just the way the chord progressions on this song is what make it. I'm not a musicologist or anything like that, but I love on the verses, in Penny Lane, there is a barber showing photographs of every head he's had the pleasure to know. That know right there, whatever chord that is the hook right there to that song, because if you didn't have that, it'd just be kind of like an ordinary melody. But that chord change, that chord right there on the no, sells the song and it sucks you in. You got the French horn on there. And one of the greatest singles of all time, that Strawberry Fields, Penny Lane. What an exciting single to come out to herald the beginning of 1967, the Summer of Love. Penny Lane is just a pop masterpiece. And I'm going to stop right there. We're into my top 50 now, but I think this is enough for another episode. So hope you're enjoying these. If you've been following along with your list, excellent. Hope you're doing great, and take care.